King Edmund the Just ruled over the prosperous kingdom of Northdale during the height of medieval times in 1347. Known for his wisdom and fair judgment, the king faced a dilemma that would test not only four noble ladies of his court but also challenge his own understanding of true worth and character. The castle of Northdale stood majestically atop rolling green hills, its stone walls weathered by centuries of English rain and sunshine. Within its great halls, tapestries depicted the deeds of kings past, while servants moved quietly through corridors lit by flickering torches. The kingdom prospered under Edmund's rule, with fertile lands yielding abundant harvests and trade routes bringing wealth from distant lands. Lady Margaret, daughter of Earl Blackwood, possessed beauty that was celebrated throughout the realm. Her golden hair cascaded like silk down her shoulders, and her emerald eyes could captivate any man who gazed upon them. She wore gowns of the finest fabrics, imported from the Mediterranean, adorned with precious stones that caught the light with every movement. Her chambers were filled with mirrors of polished silver and chests overflowing with jewels gifted by countless suitors. Lady Eleanor, the Duke of Ravenshollow's eldest daughter, commanded respect through her sharp intellect and political acumen. She could recite poetry in 3 languages, discuss philosophy with learned scholars, and navigate the treacherous waters of court politics with remarkable skill. Her library contained manuscripts copied by monks from distant monasteries, and she corresponded regularly with learned men across Europe. Many believed she possessed the mind of a future queen. Lady Catherine, niece to the wealthy merchant Baron Whitmore, brought with her the promise of vast riches. Her family's trading empire stretched from the wool markets of England to the spice routes of Constantinople. Ships bearing her family's crest sailed regularly into the kingdom's harbours, their holds filled with exotic goods that could fund armies or build cathedrals. She spoke often of dowries that could rival royal treasuries. But it was young Sarah, a humble maid who served in the castle kitchens, who would soon capture the king's attention in ways none could have predicted. Sarah rose before dawn each day to tend the great hearths, her hands roughened by years of honest labour. She knew every servant by name, shared her meagre meals with those who had less, and sang softly while she worked, bringing joy to the darkest corners of the castle. The king had been observing the character of these women for months, seeking to understand their true nature beyond the facades of nobility and wealth. He noticed how Lady Margaret dismissed servants with barely a glance, how Lady Eleanor used her knowledge to belittle others, and how Lady Catherine spoke of people as though they were mere numbers in her ledger books. One autumn morning, as golden leaves danced outside the castle windows, King Edmund summoned his most trusted goldsmith. Master Geoffrey had served the royal family for 30 years, his skilled hands having crafted countless treasures for the crown. The king's request was unusual but specific: 4 identical golden crowns, each a masterpiece of medieval craftsmanship, but with subtle differences that would reveal the character of whoever chose them. The first crown gleamed with polished gold inlaid with precious rubies and sapphires. Its design spoke of luxury and status, meant to catch every eye in a crowded hall. The second crown bore intricate engravings depicting scenes of learning and wisdom, with pearls arranged to form constellations that ancient scholars claimed influenced human destiny. The third crown was adorned with diamonds and emeralds worth more than most nobles saw in a lifetime, its weight substantial enough to remind the wearer of the material wealth it represented. The fourth crown, however, was different. Though crafted from the same pure gold, it bore simple engravings of wheat sheaves, olive branches, and dove symbols of peace, prosperity, and hope. Small gems were arranged not for ostentation, but to catch candlelight and cast gentle shadows, creating an effect of quiet beauty rather than overwhelming splendor. The great hall of Northdale Castle had been transformed for the momentous occasion. Banners bearing the royal coat of arms hung from the vaulted ceiling, while hundreds of beeswax candles cast dancing shadows across the stone walls. Noble families from across the kingdom had gathered to witness what they believed would be a traditional courtship announcement, though none suspected the true nature of King Edmund's test. At the centre of the hall stood an ornate oak table, its surface covered with rich burgundy velvet. Upon this cloth rested 4 wooden boxes, each carved with the royal seal and lined with silk. Inside each box lay one of Master Geoffrey's golden crowns, hidden from view until the moment of revelation. The king had spent sleepless nights contemplating this test, knowing that his choice of a queen would affect not only his own happiness, but the future of his entire realm. Lady Margaret entered the hall first, her silk gown rustling with each calculated step. The fabric, dyed with costly indigo brought from distant lands, complemented her fair complexion perfectly. Pearls from the northern seas adorned her neck, and her golden hair had been arranged in elaborate braids woven with ribbons of silver thread. She moved with the practiced grace of nobility, acknowledging the bows and curtsies of lesser nobles with subtle nods of her perfectly sculpted head. Behind her came Lady Eleanor, dressed more modestly, but no less impressively in deep forest green wool trimmed with ermine fur. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, revealing intelligent brown eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail of the assembled crowd. She carried herself with the confidence of one accustomed to being the most learned person in any room, her posture straight and her gaze direct. Several scholarly advisers to the king nodded respectfully as she passed, recognizing her reputation for intellectual prowess. Lady Catherine made her entrance wearing robes of midnight blue silk that whispered of wealth with every movement. Golden chains hung at her waist, and rings adorned nearly every finger, each gem carefully chosen to display her family's trading connections across Europe and beyond. The scent of exotic perfumes from Constantinople followed in her wake, and the sound of coins jingling softly in hidden purses accompanied her steps. Merchants and minor nobles bowed deeply, well aware of her family's financial influence. The crowd murmured with anticipation as these three noble ladies took their positions before the mysterious boxes. Speculation ran wild among the assembled courtiers about which lady the king might favour and what significance these ornate containers might hold. Some whispered of engagement rings, others of tests of worthiness, but none guessed the true nature of what lay ahead. Then, to the surprise of every person present, King Edmund raised his hand and called out in a clear, commanding voice that echoed through the stone chamber. Sarah of the Kitchens stepped forward and joined these ladies. A collective gasp rippled through the great hall. Nobles turned to stare as a young woman in simple homespun wool emerged from behind a pillar where she had been standing with the other servants. Sarah's dress was clean but patched in several places, dyed with common herbs to a modest brown colour. Her auburn hair was braided simply and pinned beneath a linen cap, and her hands bore the calluses of honest labour. She wore no jewellery, save for a small wooden cross that hung from a cord around her neck, carved by her late father. The contrast between Sarah and the three noble ladies could not have been more stark. While they stood adorned in finery, worth more than most peasants earned in a lifetime, she approached with quiet dignity despite her humble appearance. Her green eyes, bright with intelligence and kindness, met the king's gaze without fear or presumption. She curtsied deeply, as was proper, but there was something in her bearing that suggested inner strength rather than mere subservience. Lady Margaret's perfectly composed expression flickered with confusion and barely concealed disdain. She had never paid attention to kitchen servants, considering them beneath her notice. The idea that such a person might be included in what she had assumed was a competition among nobles struck her as absurd and perhaps insulting. Lady Eleanor's analytical mind began working immediately, trying to understand the king's strategy. Was this some sort of political statement? A test of their reactions to the lower classes? She studied Sarah with the same intensity she might apply to a difficult philosophical problem, searching for clues to the king's intentions. Lady Catherine's merchant instincts told her that nothing in royal courts happened without purpose. If the king had included a servant in this gathering, there must be some advantage to be gained or lesson to be learned. She calculated quickly, wondering if showing kindness to the common folk might somehow benefit her position. King Edmund stepped forward, his royal robes of deep purple velvet rustling softly against the stone floor. The golden circlet upon his brow caught the candlelight as he addressed the four women standing before him. His voice carried the authority of kingship, but also a warmth that suggested this moment held deep personal significance. "Ladies," he began, his words carefully chosen and delivered with the gravity befitting a royal pronouncement. "Before you lie 4 crowns, each crafted by the finest goldsmith in my realm. Each of you shall choose one, and your choice will reveal the nature of your heart and the depth of your character." The silence in the great hall was profound as King Edmund's words settled over the assembled crowd. 400 pairs of eyes focused intently on the scene unfolding before them, while the 4 women stood motionless, each contemplating the weight of the moment. The flickering candlelight created an almost sacred atmosphere, as if this choice would determine far more than anyone yet understood. Master Geoffrey stepped forward and, with ceremonial precision, lifted the lids of all 4 boxes simultaneously. The golden crowns caught the light immediately, each one blazing with its own distinct character and beauty. Gasps of admiration rose from the crowd as they beheld the magnificent craftsmanship that represented months of the goldsmith's finest work. Lady Margaret's eyes immediately fixed upon the first crown, the one adorned with brilliant rubies and sapphires. The gems seemed to call to her, promising the kind of attention and admiration she had craved her entire life. She imagined how the crown would look upon her golden hair, how the precious stones would complement her emerald eyes, and how every person in the kingdom would recognize her beauty and status when she wore such a magnificent piece. Her heart raced with desire as she pictured herself at royal ceremonies, the most beautiful woman in attendance, envied by all who saw her. Lady Eleanor found herself drawn to the second crown, the one bearing intricate engravings that spoke of wisdom and learning. She traced the carved symbols with her eyes, recognizing astronomical charts, mathematical formulas rendered in gold, and quotations from ancient philosophers etched in Latin around the crown's circumference. This was clearly meant for someone who valued knowledge above all else, someone who understood that true power came not from beauty or wealth, but from the ability to think, reason, and guide others through wisdom. She felt a deep satisfaction at being able to interpret the crown's scholarly symbolism. Lady Catherine's merchant instincts immediately calculated the value of the third crown, the one heavy with diamonds and emeralds. Her experienced eye estimated the worth of each gem, the purity of the gold, and the hours of skilled labor required to create such a masterpiece. This crown represented security, the kind of wealth that could weather any storm, fund any venture, or purchase any luxury. She thought of her family's trading empire and how such a crown would announce to the world that she possessed not just noble blood, but the practical wealth to back up any claim or ambition. Sarah stood quietly, her hands clasped before her, making no move toward any of the crowns. Her simple wooden cross seemed almost to glow in contrast to the golden treasures before her. While the 3 noble ladies studied their preferred choices with obvious longing, Sarah appeared troubled, her brow furrowed in thought. She glanced around the great hall, taking in the faces of the servants she knew by name, the common folk who had been allowed to witness this royal ceremony from the back of the room. King Edmund watched each woman's reaction carefully, his years of ruling having taught him to read character in the smallest gestures and expressions. He saw Lady Margaret's barely concealed greed, the way her fingers twitched as if already reaching for the ruby-adorned crown. He noticed Lady Eleanor's intellectual pride, the satisfaction that crossed her features as she deciphered the scholarly symbols. He observed Lady Catherine's calculating gaze, the way she mentally tallied the worth of precious stones as if they were entries in a ledger book. But it was Sarah's reaction that intrigued him most. While the others showed immediate attraction to specific crowns, she seemed genuinely distressed by the choice before her. She looked at each crown with appreciation for their beauty and craftsmanship, but her eyes kept returning to the faces in the crowd, particularly to an elderly servant woman who had helped raise her after her parents died, and to a young kitchen boy who reminded her of her younger brother. "Choose wisely," the king said, his voice carrying across the stone chamber. "Let your heart guide your hand, for in this choice you reveal not only what you desire, but who you truly are." Lady Margaret stepped forward first, unable to contain her eagerness any longer. Her silk slippers made soft sounds against the stone floor as she approached the first crown. She reached out with perfectly manicured hands, her fingers trembling slightly with excitement as they hovered over the rubies and sapphires. The gems seemed to pulse with inner fire in the candlelight, promising her everything she had ever dreamed of possessing. Lady Eleanor moved with measured steps toward the second crown, her scholar's mind appreciating the intellectual complexity of its design. She recognized quotations from Aristotle and Plato worked into the golden engravings, along with astronomical symbols that spoke of humanity's quest to understand the heavens. This crown represented everything she valued: knowledge, wisdom, and the respect that came with learning. Lady Catherine approached the third crown with the practical assessment of a successful merchant. She could see that the diamonds were perfectly cut, the emeralds flawless, and the gold of the highest purity. This crown represented security and power in their most tangible forms, the kind of wealth that could influence kingdoms and secure dynasties. But Sarah remained where she stood, her green eyes now glistening with unshed tears. The weight of the moment seemed to press upon her slender shoulders as she realized that whatever choice she made would change her life forever. She thought of her humble quarters in the servants' wing, of the other maids and kitchen workers who depended on her kindness and friendship, of the simple joy she found in her daily work and quiet prayers. The great hall held its collective breath as the moment of choice arrived, and the four women prepared to reveal the true contents of their hearts. The tension in the great hall reached its peak as Lady Margaret's fingers finally closed around the ruby and sapphire crown. She lifted it with reverent care, her eyes bright with triumph as she placed it upon her golden head. The precious stones caught every flicker of candlelight, creating a dazzling display that drew gasps of admiration from the assembled nobles. She turned slowly, allowing everyone to witness her transformation from beautiful lady to magnificent queen-like figure, her smile radiant with satisfaction and pride. "I choose beauty," she declared, her voice ringing with confidence across the stone chamber. "For what is a kingdom without beauty to inspire its people? What is a court without elegance to elevate the spirits of all who enter? This crown represents the finest things in life, the artistic achievements that separate civilization from barbarism." She stood straighter, the weight of the golden crown making her feel more regal than ever before. Lady Eleanor stepped forward next, her movements deliberate and measured. She lifted the crown of wisdom with both hands, examining the intricate engravings one final time before placing it carefully upon her dark hair. The scholarly symbols seemed to come alive in the firelight, and she felt a deep sense of rightness, as if this crown had been crafted specifically for her intellectual nature. "I choose knowledge," she announced with quiet dignity, "for wisdom guides nations through troubled times, and learning builds bridges between peoples. A ruler must understand history to avoid repeating its mistakes, must comprehend philosophy to make just decisions, and must embrace scholarship to lead her subjects toward enlightenment." Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to teaching and guiding others through complex ideas. Lady Catherine approached her chosen crown with the practiced assessment of a successful negotiator. She hefted the diamond and emerald crown, appreciating its substantial weight before settling it upon her head. The gems flashed with cold fire, and she felt the satisfying presence of tangible wealth resting upon her brow. "I choose prosperity," she declared with the confidence of one who understood the practical realities of power. "For without wealth, kingdoms fall to ruin, armies cannot be fed, and people suffer in poverty. Gold builds roads, gems purchase grain during famines, and treasures secure alliances with distant lands. A wise ruler understands that beauty fades, and knowledge means nothing if her people starve." Her merchant's pragmatism rang through every word. All eyes now turned to Sarah, who remained standing before the fourth and final crown. The simple golden circlet with its engravings of wheat sheaves, olive branches, and doves seemed almost plain in comparison to the magnificent choices made by the three noble ladies. The crowd waited expectantly, many wondering what possible reason the king could have had for including a kitchen maid in this royal ceremony. Sarah looked at the remaining crown with tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. She thought of her fellow servants watching from the back of the hall, of the children in the village who went to bed hungry on cold winter nights, of the elderly castle workers whose backs were bent from decades of faithful service. She thought of her own mother, who had died tending to plague victims in the poorest quarters of the kingdom, never thinking of her own safety when others needed help. With trembling hands, Sarah reached not for the crown, but instead removed her simple wooden cross from around her neck. She placed it gently beside the golden circlet, and then, to the absolute astonishment of everyone present, stepped back from the table entirely. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice soft but clear enough to carry throughout the silent hall, "I cannot choose this crown, beautiful as it is, when I know that its gold could feed 100 hungry families through the harsh winter ahead. I cannot wear jewels upon my head when children in your kingdom lack warm clothes and proper shoes. I cannot claim such treasure for myself when the servants who work beside me every day earn barely enough to survive." The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Lady Margaret gasped audibly, her ruby crown suddenly feeling heavier upon her head. Lady Eleanor's scholarly mind raced to understand this unexpected development, while Lady Catherine calculated rapidly what this might mean for her own position. But Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger with conviction. If I must choose something, then I choose service. I choose to remain where I am, helping others, sharing what little I have, and finding joy in simple acts of kindness. The greatest crown any person can wear is the respect earned through compassion and the love given freely to those in need. King Edmund's face remained impassive, but those who knew him well could see the profound emotions stirring in his eyes. He had witnessed exactly what he had hoped to see, yet Sarah's response exceeded even his highest expectations. The other three ladies had chosen predictably, each selecting the crown that reflected their primary values and desires. But Sarah had chosen something that no crown could represent. "And what of your own future?" the king asked quietly, his voice carrying a gentleness that surprised many in the hall. "What of your own dreams and desires? Do you ask for nothing?" Sarah met his gaze with quiet dignity, her green eyes clear despite her tears. "I ask only to continue serving faithfully, Your Majesty, to help where help is needed, to comfort where comfort is lacking, and to remember always that true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in what we give freely to others." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the crackling of torches and the distant sound of wind against the castle walls. Three noble ladies stood adorned with golden crowns, their choices made and their characters revealed. But it was the humble maid, standing empty-handed, yet somehow radiant, who had truly captured the attention of everyone present. King Edmund stepped forward, his footsteps echoing in the hushed great hall as he approached the four women who had revealed their true natures through their choices. The assembled crowd watched in breathless anticipation as their sovereign prepared to render his judgment on what they had witnessed. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across his face, emphasizing the gravity of this moment that would be remembered in the kingdom's chronicles for generations to come. "Lady Margaret," the king began, his voice carrying the authority of his royal office, "you have chosen beauty, and there is no shame in appreciating the finer things that God has granted to this world. Beauty inspires art, poetry, and the noble aspirations of the human spirit." He paused, allowing his words to settle before continuing. "Yet beauty without compassion becomes vanity, and vanity builds walls between the ruler and the ruled. A crown worn only for its magnificence serves no purpose beyond the mirror." Lady Margaret's triumphant expression faltered as the weight of the king's words reached her. The ruby and sapphire crown suddenly felt heavier upon her head, and she found herself thinking of all the servants she had dismissed without a second glance, all the common folk whose struggles had never touched her perfectly arranged world. "Lady Eleanor," King Edmund continued, turning to face the scholarly woman, "wisdom is indeed precious, and knowledge guides nations through their darkest hours. The pursuit of learning honors both God and humanity, and your dedication to scholarship is admirable." His tone remained respectful but grew more solemn. "However, wisdom without humility becomes pride, and pride blinds us to the simple truths that often matter most. The greatest scholars in history understood that true knowledge begins with recognizing how little we truly know." Lady Eleanor's confident posture wavered as she considered the king's assessment. She thought of all the times she had used her learning to make others feel inferior, all the moments when her intellectual pride had prevented her from truly listening to the wisdom that could come from unexpected sources. "Lady Catherine," the king said, addressing the merchant's daughter with equal gravity, "prosperity is necessary for a kingdom's survival, and your understanding of commerce and trade would serve any realm well. Without wealth, armies cannot march, cities cannot grow, and people cannot thrive." His expression grew more serious. "But when prosperity becomes the sole measure of worth, we lose sight of the treasures that cannot be counted in gold or gems. The richest kingdoms in history have fallen when their leaders forgot that true wealth lies in the loyalty and love of their people." Lady Catherine felt the weight of the diamond and emerald crown pressing down upon her head as she realized the king's meaning. Her merchant's mind, so skilled at calculating profit and loss, began to understand that some values could not be measured by any earthly standard. Finally, King Edmund turned to Sarah, who stood empty-handed but somehow radiant in her simple brown dress. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath as the king approached the humble maid who had refused to claim any crown for herself. "Sarah," he said, his voice gentle but filled with profound respect, You alone understood the true test before you. When faced with treasures beyond your wildest dreams, you thought not of yourself, but of others. When offered a crown that could elevate you above your station, you chose instead to remain faithful to your calling of service. The king's eyes shone with an emotion that surprised even his closest advisors. You have shown that the greatest crown anyone can wear is a heart filled with compassion, and the truest wealth is found in the love we give freely to others. King Edmund then did something that stunned every person in the great hall. He removed his own golden circlet, the symbol of his royal authority, and knelt before the simple kitchen maid. The gasps and murmurs that erupted from the crowd were quickly silenced as the profound significance of this gesture became clear. "Sarah of the Kitchens," he said, his voice carrying across the stone chamber, "will you accept my proposal of marriage? Will you become my queen? Not because of any crown you might wear, but because of the crown of virtue you already possess. Will you help me rule this kingdom with the same compassion and wisdom you have shown in the humblest of circumstances?" Sarah's tears flowed freely as she looked down at the king kneeling before her. The wooden cross around her neck seemed to catch the candlelight, glowing softly against her simple dress. She thought of her parents who had taught her that true nobility came from serving others, and of the countless servants and common folk who had become her extended family in the castle. "Your Majesty," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, "I am not worthy of such honor. But if you believe I can serve your people as their queen with the same dedication I have tried to show as a servant, then yes, I will gladly accept." The great hall erupted in a mixture of cheers and shocked exclamations as King Edmund rose and placed his royal circlet gently upon Sarah's auburn hair. The simple wooden cross at her throat seemed to complement the golden crown perfectly, symbolizing the union of earthly authority and heavenly virtue that would define her reign. The three noble ladies stood in stunned silence, their own crowns suddenly feeling like mere ornaments compared to the genuine transformation they had witnessed. In choosing what they thought would elevate them, they had revealed the limitations of their character, but Sarah, in refusing to take what was offered, had shown herself worthy of far greater treasures than any golden crown could represent. As the news spread throughout the kingdom in the days that followed, the people celebrated their new queen with genuine joy. She had been one of them, had known their struggles and shared their burdens. They trusted that she would never forget where she came from, or abandon those who needed her most. And so it was that King Edmund's test revealed not only the character of 4 women, but the true meaning of nobility itself. The kingdom prospered under their joint rule, guided by wisdom, strengthened by compassion, and enriched by the understanding that the greatest treasures are those that cannot be bought, sold, or stolen, but must be earned through a lifetime of faithful service to others.